Hello, you're listening to The Sower, a podcast of the Ciceronian Society. The Ciceronian Society is a community of Christian scholars and public intellectuals committed to the examination of three core themes: tradition, place, and things divine, and their role in the intellectual discipleship of the church and civilization generally. To learn more about us, our events, this podcast, and to make your tax-deductible gift, please go to ciceroniansociety.org. That's CICERONIANSOCIETY.org. I'm Josh Bowman, Vice President of the Ciceronian Society, and before we get started, please join me in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we pray, O Lord, that you would bless our conversation and that all we say and do would bring glory and honor to you. Amen. It is Candlemas for Western Christianity, so it is February 2nd, 2024, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my friends Trey Dimsdale and Jordan Ballor. Trey is the Executive Director of the Center for Religion, Culture, and Democracy, which we'll refer to as the CRCD here. And Jordan Ballor is the Director of Research at the CRCD. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Glad
thanks.
Joining you.
Excited to be here.
The CRCD has long been a major partner of the Ciceronian Society, and this year they are designated as a Tulia sponsor. At least I think it's either Tulia or Tulia. It depends on who I'm talking to. Tulia being the name of Cicero's beloved daughter. You can visit our website to learn more about these sponsorship levels. We're going to start, though, by learning a little more about what the CRCD is and what they do. And then I want to turn to a recent article that Trey and Jordan wrote at lawandliberty.org regarding the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I believe it was the 75th anniversary just this past December 2023. So let's start with this. I'll hand it over to Trey. Trey, tell us a little more about what the CRCD is and what you guys do, what you've been up to, and just because I'm sure people have heard of you at this point, especially from our audience, but there's plenty of people who haven't. So tell us a little more about what you do.
So we are embedded inside of a larger nonprofit, the First Liberty Institute, which is the largest public interest law firm in the U.S. that's exclusively focused on religious freedom litigation. And several years ago, when First Liberty's mission expanded beyond just Texas-centric litigation, they decided to launch a think tank. And so to expand their advocacy, not just in the courtroom, but then also in the wider culture as well. So the CRCD brand launched in October of 2020. We do programs for students, we do programs for academics, we do programs for pastors and religious leaders. The name is reflective of sort of a metaphysical priority that embodies all of the work that we do. We believe that religion provides the moral vocabulary for a unique type of culture to emerge, and then from the right types of culture, you have democratic institutions that emerge to be able to cultivate and stabilize that type of culture. And so through our work, our educational programming for college students, our support of research projects with academics and our publications, we are trying to make the case that religion is something that's good for everybody, whether you practice or not. And we take the position that by defending religion in the public square, religious institutions, religious ideas, and religious persons, you actually are directly defending democracy as well. And so if religious freedom is the political conduit that allows religious institutions and persons to exist freely in the public square and to engage in religious practice, then we're complementing the pre-existing mission of First Liberty, which has been focused on legal advocacy as well. So we've actually expanded the portfolio of what it is that First Liberty Institute does to further the cause of religious freedom in the U.S.
Now, one of the biggest things you do in this process, then, or in this, in one of the biggest activities you do, is your fellowship programs. which is one of the first things I heard about when you all got started. Just in a very quick version, can you tell us a little bit about that? I know they have the Shaftesbury Fellowship and a couple other ones. Just what's the quick elevator pitch for those?
Yeah, so the Shaftesbury Fellowship is our premier event. It's a 10-week paid fellowship for upper level undergraduate students and recent graduates who are interested in pursuing careers in academia. We want this to be like a platform where they can jump off into into graduate programs, elite graduate programs, and see this as a starting point of their academic careers. And so they have reading seminars every week with different guest scholars that we bring in, and they also work with an established scholar in their field to produce a publishable quality um, paper or research. Hopefully, they're able to use that as a writing sample for a graduate school application. The other two that we do are much smaller or shorter, I guess I should say, where we have something for students that are interested in careers in public service. They may be interested in running for office, or they may be interested in working for a think tank. And we spend 5 days with them in Washington, D.C., and we are trying to help them wrestle with the unique calling of a Christian and the unique ethical questions that a Christian has to wrestle with if they're going to build a career in that field. And so we bring in people who have been able to have successful careers in that area. We don't bring in people who have, necessarily have 50,000 followers on Twitter, but people who've sort of been in the trenches and been faced with the types of dilemmas that these students are signing up for. And then we have an event every spring that's less skills focused and more theoretical, the Savannah Seminar on Religion, Culture, and Democracy. We go to Savannah because it's one of the oldest cities in the U.S., and it has not bulldozed under its history like some others have. And you can see the effect of multiple generations of single families contributing and investing into one community. And we explore this theme, this triad of religion, culture, democracy, the way that those things fit together. And we're able to use the city as a laboratory to be able to see, from the very first, within the very first months of Savannah's founding, it became an early experiment in pluralism. It was the first place in North America where Jews were allowed to own property. They were allowed to own property before Catholics were. And over the course of the first 10 or 15 years of the establishment of the colony of Georgia, it ended up being quite a religiously diverse place where people were forced to cooperate, find ways to cooperate, to build a unique type of cultural cooperation so that they're able to survive.
It should be immediately apparent then to those listening why there's such a natural overlap and partnership between the CRCD and the Ciceronian Society. Not only do you have this emphasis on religion, so things divine and tradition, but also the sense of place. I think the Savannah Seminar being one of the best examples I've ever heard of in terms of that place. Also, one of the exciting things is the last several years, several of these fellows have ended up at the Ciceronian Society conference to present their work. And if you're someone who's interested in religion, culture, and democracy, our conference is certainly among the best venues to find an audience who is both sympathetic but also helpful, and will encourage you to improve what you're doing and help you get connected to other scholars and other institutions that are interested in that. The last thing I want to talk about with regard to what y'all are up to, and I want to go over to Jordan here. Jordan has a long and distinguished career in research and writing. Many of you will know him from the projects with Abraham Kuyper and the collected works of Abraham Kuyper. But he's also, I know you're working with the Journal for Religion, Culture, and Democracy and a new reading wheel online essay thing. Can you tell us just a little bit more about the Journal real quick, as well as the reading wheel thing you just launched?
Yeah, so as Trey mentioned, a lot of the programs we began with have focused on students. We've also always viewed academics and scholars as part of our audience. I mean, we want to help cultivate more healthy and civilization affirming kinds of scholarship and in the academy from students to professors and staff and administrators and so on. So, one of the mandates was to create an outlet for scholarly expression uh, that we've called very imaginatively the Journal of Religion, Culture, and Democracy. We've now launched that. That's going strong. We're into our second year of publication. It's an open access online journal that publishes reviews and review essays, as you typically see in journals, as well as research articles. One of the features that we've started with and will continue to do is to have workshops where we have some thematic papers that get worked through and talked through and then go through a review process and then appear. So the first results of those have now appeared at the CRCD. Last year was the 80th anniversary of the publication of C.S. Lewis's classic, The Abolition of Man. So we solicited a number of contributors on the abolition of man and the varieties of ways in which the central message and warning of that prophetic text is relevant today across a variety of disciplines and concerns. So the fruits of that symposium are now up at the Journal of Religion, Culture, and Democracy. We want to be entrepreneurial too and continue to find ways to serve various audiences and constituencies. So one of the latest things we've launched is something called the Reading Wheel Review. Another mandate that we had was to have some kind of an email message or newsletter,
Right.
I think was what we called it. And like many of us, our email inboxes are full of messages that come to us from groups that we support, or people who buy our names off a list, and we may or may not have ever opted into those lists.
Right, yeah, maybe
And
it's
mostly
stolen,
those
yeah.
things, mostly those things are telling you how great the place is and what kinds of support you should give them, which is natural and valuable. But we wanted to do something a little different and have a little more substance. So we do have a weekly email communication that we're calling the Reading Wheel Review. But the basic idea is that we're going to spend some time every month focusing on a book. We think of books as centrally important cultural artifacts for all kinds of reasons, both historically as well as in terms of practice, in terms of forming our intellects and our moral sensibilities. So over the course of each month, we'll do a variety of features, one a week, focusing on that particular book. So we'll spend a month per book. And we just launched last month in January. And the opening book that we spent January on was Roger Scruton's Conservatism: An Invitation to the Great Tradition. So we had an excerpt from the book to open it up, a kind of a traditional review of that book, an essay that engages it constructively, and then a podcast interview that Trey did with the Irish philosopher Mark Dooley, who's, among other things, Sir Roger Scruton's biographer and executor of his literary estate. So this month in February, we're engaging Kevin Vallier's All the Kingdoms of the World, an analytical engagement of the movement known as integralism or neo-integralism. And so we're doing that similar kind of a model on that book. And, the editorial calendar's taking shape for the rest of the year. So we're pretty excited about this and welcome people to engage with that new initiative.
It's a tricky thing to be innovative in this kind of world of ideas. So I'm encouraged to see the Reading Wheel. It's not something I had seen before, and I think it's going to be good going forward. I've read the first couple, including the one. I think the one for Kevin was that today. You sent that out. These last.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Within the last day, the excerpt of that book, All the Kingdoms of the World, did go out. So
yeah, I the last couple of days have run together for me, so I couldn't remember if it's this morning or not. Well, this is encouraging, a lot of fun. I wanted to kind of jump from talking about the CRCD to maybe just talking about some underlying themes here. And I want to get to the article you guys wrote about the UDHR in a minute, but I also want to talk about maybe a more provocative conversation in this. A key word here is democracy. And, having this just is coming off a class that I was teaching last night with graduate students online. And right now there's a lot of talk about there are threats to democracy. Democracy is in danger. Democracy is declining. which for me as a political philosopher, I die a little bit inside, not because I dislike democracy, but because I don't know what anyone's talking about. A lot of times it just seems that democracy is in decline when my side of democracy is not winning, to put it cynically. And so I'm wondering, in thinking about religion's contribution to democracy, which to me and just about anybody who would come to the Ciceronian Society would be obvious. What democracy is becoming less obvious, is becoming even more muddled, I think. So I guess when you guys think about this, and I don't know which one of you wants to go first, whoever unmutes themselves first is the winner here. What do you think when you think of democracy and what it means and what it is? What is religion contributing to here? What is culture contributing to here? What do you mean?
Well, I can filibuster for a minute while Trey thinks of something smarter.
Trey comes
to
up with a
say
better
if you
answer,
want, but-
right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the reality is obviously any of these terms, especially a term like democracy, is contested.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we use that term, mostly we use it as a shorthand to talk about politics in general, and the kinds of historical regimes that are characteristic of Western liberal democracies from the 18th century onward. So, there are varieties, as you know, given your political science background,
Right.
the technicalities of what those regimes look like are different. You could have constitutional monarchies and
Right.
federalist, republican forms of self-government, and so on. When I think of democracy in our name and in terms of our themes, I think of that's a shorthand way of talking about the political institutions of self-governance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's not simply just a process.
The majority rule,
Right.
it's not simply procedural, and it's not simply something a very narrow understanding of majority rules with no consistency from one day to the next or anything like that.
And I think too, Trey, you were going to say something?
I was going to say too that part of the reality of the audiences that we work with, the majority are Christian, or they come from a Christian background. They may or may not be necessarily enthusiastically practicing a Christian, in the Christian tradition. But we specifically chose the name religion rather than Christianity because whatever it is that is the sort of fundamental metaphysical commitments of a people is going to end up having consequences downstream. There's plenty of debate, obviously, at the moment about Christian nationalism. That seems to sort of be what you paint your enemies on the right as being, without having any kind of a clear definition of it. But before that, there was sort of more controversy around the concept of a Christian nation, whether it was possible, whether America was a Christian nation, whether whatever was the West or whatever. And I think the most helpful philosopher that's engaged this is the French philosopher Pierre Manent, and he probably reflects kind of the position of what our approach to this question would be. And that's to say that those immediate religious commitments that are really metaphysical commitments that are informed by Christianity have sort of woven their way into the DNA of the civilization that's ultimately arisen in the West. There's no real way to escape it. And so whether or not you have a nation full of people that are actively practicing some form of Christianity, you still have aspects of both the culture and the governmental institutions of that nation that are completely they're inextricably intertwined with sort of first principles that are derived from Christianity. Like any political discourse that for example, that engages with the question of rights is one that Manent defines as having a Christian mark. And so our goal is not necessarily to proselytize or to make the argument that in order to have democracy or in order to have stability or for a nation state to actually be able to be stable, you have to have a majority of people that are practicing some form of Christianity. But the reality is that different types of cultural, different types of cultures emerge from populations that are dominated by a particular type of religious commitment. And then from those cultures, particular types of governmental structures will emerge. And our goal would be to make, the various religious groups that are reflected in a pluralistic society more aware of those connections, to be circumspect with the way that they commit themselves to different policy questions or prudential questions that are a part of our democratic deliberation as people trying to figure out how to live together. And so in the context of a plural society like you will find in most of the West, I mean, we want religious adherents to be better Christians, better Jews, better Muslims, people that can come into the public square and express the sort of the fundamental tenets of the religion that they claim, and to be honest about the implications of those things so that we are able to have a productive political discourse, both inside of our own traditions, but also across traditions as well.
I think that's a refreshingly different way to think about religion, the relationship between religion, culture, and democracy. I think in comparison to what is often discussed today. And what I mean by that is a kind of ideological democratism. I believe Emily Finley, I know she wrote a book, I can't remember the name of the book, and other authors have remarked on this about how a lot of this talk about democracy considers democracy to be an end in itself. As if simply, okay, now we got democracy, majority rule, usually what they mean, or at least the majority that I side with, whatever that happens to be, is democracy winning, and democracy as an end in itself. And I think this is a much more substantive, nuanced way to think about democracy. It also made me think about a couple books that I would recommend to our listeners on this question, some older ones, especially Irving Babbitt's old book about, I think we're at the 100-year, I think it's been 100 years since this was published, 100 years ago, Democracy and Leadership by Irving Babbitt. I think that came out in 1924, yeah. As well as The Moral Foundations of Democracy by John Hollowell, an amazing book, which I cannot recommend highly enough. And then a lesser-known book by, in full disclosure, my dissertation advisor, Klaus Rinn, Democracy and the Ethical Life, which I also think is excellent in the sense that democracy is not something we necessarily need to run from, but it is neither an end in itself, nor is it necessarily self-sustaining. And so it needs to have this underlying cultural, moral, ethical vision behind it. Now, of course, one of the key elements of this is all the dynamics of rights, and the importance of rights to democracy and to that conversation. And you guys released an essay it's February. So back in December, we had the 75-year anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was, I believe the word would be ratified or at least approved or promulgated, whatever the word is, on December 10th, 1948. Massive document, and one of the massively important document, and one of the most important examples of how in a more or less post-Christian world, post-Christian West, residual Christianity still had a significant impact on these liberal democratic ideas of rights, especially through the persons of Jacques Maritain and I believe you said, is it Charles Malik? Is that how you say it?
Malik.
Okay.
Yep.
Really, really interesting stuff here. I'm just wondering if we could, and I'll start with you, Jordan. How did you see? The main argument is, as I read it, the UDHR is a great example of how, look, Christianity is not an obstacle to our rights, not an obstacle to our freedom, our liberty. It's actually helping everyone. and this is a great example. Is that your approach there?
Yeah, so we saw this anniversary as an opportunity to kind of re-examine this foundationally important document for so much of rights discourse over the 20th century, and bring in some other perspectives too. So we helped organize a symposium at Law and Liberty. So there is an essay by Trey and I on the Christian contributions to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and then there are another 3 essays that focus on different aspects of rights discourse in light of the UDHR and other phenomena in the intervening 3/4 of a century. One way of thinking about these kinds of documents is as cultural artifacts and how they relate to a particular historical and cultural moment. Josh, when you were just talking about the relationship between democracy and religion, that part of that conversation, I immediately went back to John Adams' quote about the American Constitution, where he said that it was made only for a moral and a religious people, and
Right,
it's
yeah.
wholly inadequate for the government of any other. And you can think about the positive law in that sense as it relates to the moral order, the natural law, and cultural institutions at a particular time and place. And so you really have to have both. And in many ways, that connects or is a perfect picture of the relationship between First Liberty Institute and the litigation work that First Liberty does and the cultural advocacy that we do at the CRCD as part of that larger work. We're trying to address, in that sense, the positive law and the moral order. There is both the grounding and a requirement and an outflow of the law of the land in that sense. And so in the same way, a kind of a constitutional document with a small c, something like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is grounded in a particular time and place, and yet, even by its name, you can see that it's an attempt to articulate something universal, something that applies everywhere and always and to everyone. So the goal in our essay was really to highlight generally the kind of Christian contribution. I mean, there's a lot of arguments you can make about rights discourse, some of which Trey has already invoked in discussing Mena and the relationship between Christianity and rights talk. But in particular, these 2 figures, Jacques Maritain, the Roman Catholic philosopher and political theorist, and Charles Malik, who was an Orthodox Christian and substantively engaged in the text of the document. So in many ways, you could think of Maritain as a kind of, Paul Marshall calls him, I think, a godfather of the process that results in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and then Malik is much more concretely involved in the actual construction of the document.
Mm-hmm. And Malik is someone I had never, until I read your article, I actually never heard of him. I certainly heard of Maritain, but tell us a little bit about. So it's Charles Habib Malik served as Lebanese ambassador to the U.S. beginning in 1945, and was I don't know how to say this word, rapporteur to the UN Human Rights Commission in 1947. And he, like you said, he's from an Arab Christian family, and he's specifically helping draft the actual text itself of the Declaration of Human Rights. And so I guess what do we know more about him and his and not only in that background, but how he viewed rights in relation to his own faith? Did he see himself as not in a kind of theocratic sense, like I'm imposing Christianity on the rest of the world, but was he very self-consciously understanding this as an extension of his Christianity, I guess you could say, as Maritain arguably did, especially with his being rooted in natural law and the Thomistic tradition?
Well, given the fact that he was Lebanese and raised in a Christian family, but in a context where they were not in his family was not in a nation that was dominated by Christians. He understood the Muslim mind in the Islamic faith in a way that was both intellectual and experiential. And he had taught philosophy at the American University in Lebanon, and The reason that he was so effective in the role that he played is that the process of hammering out the actual provisions of the UDHR was pretty messy when it came to especially the questions of religious freedom and the objections that were made um, by Muslim majority countries. Now, the UDHR has been accepted and ratified by the UN, so it's not exactly like a international document where you've got signatories. So there's not technically any nations that have failed to sign it, quote unquote, because no one's actually signed it. But there were several nations that abstained. And there were some, the Soviet Union was one, even though that, had, the state-sponsored atheism was only 30 years old at that point, and it was, an Orthodox nation before that, and many people, had sort of been formed in an Orthodox context. So that was really for more ideological reasons and not necessarily purely sort of like religious differences between Christianity and the dominant faith of a community. But Afghanistan played a large role in sort of pushing back at the UDHR's sort of Christian flavor. And Malik took great pains to take those objections seriously and try to massage the way that each of these were carefully constructed. Now, at the end of the day, the UDHR is not universal in the sense that it is universally respected or universally, influential on a nation's national constitution or statutory law or practice. There's a sense in which it has like an internal coherence. It has like a horizontal coherence. But when you're looking at nations like, especially Saudi Arabia, Iran, those have been nations that have been very vocal in the last 75 years about reservations about the UDHR. Places like North Korea just simply ignore it, or make claims that of course we recognize everything that's in this, and it's actualized here in this paradise. But the implementation of sort of the ideals that are stated in the UDHR are sort of ad hoc, so it lacks like a horizontal coherence, which is really what would be required for it to truly be universal. But Malik, yeah, absolutely was well respected within every community that was represented, and we're really talking about majority Christian, majority Muslim, and then Israel was on the international scene at that time. And he did see this actually as one of his highest achievement in furtherance of his own faith-informed calling to secure rights for all people in the world.
One of the things that I'm interested in just listening to this about this the discourse, the underlying discourse here about natural rights, but also natural law. It's on my mind because just last night I was teaching a grad class with students, Christian students from a major Christian university, and they all believe in natural law, but could this be persuasive today in a sense? Like, could you even get this far with the UDHR today, in the sense that while natural law may exist, we're all made in the image of God, whether we acknowledge it or not, that there's this lack of a belief in any natural law or objective truth in this sense. And I think that's an interesting challenge that the UDHR and the spirit that animates it faces in our modern world. And you show this toward the end of the article about how recently the UN Human Rights Council was founded in 2006. They had their meeting recently in November, and ironically, I don't know how to say his name, Ali Bahraini, the UN ambassador from the Islamic Republic of Iran, served as chairperson of that meeting, a country that clearly violates Article 18 of the UDHR in the sense of religious liberty. I guess both of this terms of natural law and kind of the survival of these rights in what Aaron Renn is calling in the negative world. We don't have to get into that can of worms, but I'm just wondering, where do you stand here? Where it's like, is this really an antique now? Is the UDHR dead on arrival in a world that no longer believes in natural law?
Yeah. So let me back up a little bit and
Sure.
starting to answer that question, or at least address it, even if obliquely. Um, you know, Josh, you're not alone. I had never heard of Charles Malik either until about 10 years ago. A colleague of mine at the Acton Institute, Dylan Pauman, introduced me to his work, and he edited a reprint of one of Malik's works, Christ in Crisis, at that time. So I commend that to your listeners if they're looking to engage Malik's thought directly. And I talked to him a little bit about Malik and his role in the construction of the UDHR, and he told me this anecdote where, so the three main original drafters of the UDHR were Malik, Eleanor Roosevelt, and a Chinese philosopher named P.C. Chang. And at one point, Dylan described this dynamic between the three of them, talking about the relationship of the individual to the collective or the community. And Chang had made what Eleanor Roosevelt thought in the moment was a pretty compelling case that yes, there's a sense in which the needs of the individual, the rights of the individual need to be subsumed or put into proper relationship under the common good, you might call it, or the needs of the community. And this is a really concrete place where Malik's convictions about a Christian understanding of the dignity of the individual person created in God's image shines through. He insisted, no, we have to have the proper relationship between the individual and the community, and there's an irreducible dignity that inheres in the person as an individual person that cannot be subsumed or eliminated or instrumentalized in pursuit of some greater good or some common goal. And Malik actually was convincing in this moment for that to be the foundational kind of understanding of this dynamic between the one and the many, or the individual and the community. So there's a concrete instance where something that is informed by Christian convictions. Again, not saying you couldn't get to something like the dignity of the individual by other means or by other arguments, but his convictions about the reality of the situation with respect to the human person had a concrete and substantive influence on the kind of posture of the document itself towards the individual and rights. A shorthand version of answering your question too is just to say a number of the other contributions to the symposium that we helped put together at Law and Liberty do explicitly engage this question of natural law and its relationship to the UDHR and the efficacy of the UDHR. I think it is one of the things we've learned in the past 75 years, if it wasn't clear already. At the time of the UDHR, Lewis had already written The Abolition of Man, is that there is no other way. There's no other option. It's something like the Tao, as Lewis talked about it, the moral order, the natural law.
Yeah.
And even things that try to depart from it end up affirming it,
Right.
Unintentionally, right? So even if you claim to be a moral relativist, you don't like it when bad things happen to you, and you try to blame people for doing something you think is wrong, even if you become hypocritical in that sense and don't have a coherent ground to make that kind of a claim on. You still by nature make those kinds of judgments. So I think it is true that the reality of natural law, well, first of all, obviously exists, and to the extent that it's going to be efficacious, it's going to have to be acknowledged. And maybe there's a sense in which things have to get worse before they get better. I mean, if we really are trying to live out socially and even individually in our lives this completely radically free and untethered existential experiment in self-creation, and self-recreation, we're going to see where that leads, right? And as an ancient maxim goes, you chase nature out and she comes back with a pitchfork. So um, maybe we're set. Maybe we're set for a real resurgence in terms of the efficacy of natural law because people are going to realize, what the other options lead to.
Certainly pray you're right. And I want to encourage our readers here as I want to give you all a chance just for a last word here in just a moment, but definitely go over to lawandliberty.org to check out more pieces in that symposium. Law and Liberty, another partner of the Ciceronian Society. We always have several of their authors and folks over there with Liberty Fund and everybody. Great people. So take a look at them and take a look at the CRCD and what they're doing. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, you like these kind of conversations, which can be difficult. I mean, natural law is a heady subject, but also, as Jordan just pointed out, incredibly important. We need a resurgence of it and a recovery of what it means and as a kind of common ground that we can speak with, especially in a world of kind of inescapable pluralism that is just part of our life and our reality. But I want to give you all last word. If someone wants to learn more about the CRCD, where do they go? What do they do? And what you got some deadlines coming up, I know, for some of these fellowships, right?
We do. We've got our Savannah seminars in April, and that's we've still got a couple of spots left for that. We've actually added something new this year. And okay. Josh, you and Melissa could join us in Savannah, where we've got Friends of First Liberty that are going to be going along and kind of having it's an educational tour that's geared towards people who are not necessarily in these would be sort of like educated lay people, I guess you could say. And
educated what people?
Educated lay people. People. Maybe you would be bored by it since you're not a lay person.
I heard educated lovey people, and I didn't know what that meant. I was really confused.
So we've started doing doing this because we just had a lot of interest from people that were just, I would really like to go to something like the Savannah seminar.
Yeah.
So we carved out an opportunity for to be able to take to others along. They don't quite overlap exactly with the students, but there's some overlap. But we structured it a little bit differently. So on our website, crcd.net, there's information about all of our programs. The Savannah seminar, there's a way to register if you'd like to go on the educational tour. There's also a way to register for an educational tour that we do in Boston right around July 4th. And then there's a way to subscribe to the Reading Wheel Review. And then we never even mentioned the index that we do, the Religious Liberty of the States Index.
That should be probably a separate podcast.
That ranks all 50 states in terms of the statutory and constitutional protections for religious exercise that you would find in the state law there.
Yeah, and there's a great presentation on that, by the way. If you go to the Ciceronian Society's website, our Belmont Abbey conference, there's several videos from that conference, and you can see a presentation on the religious liberty in the states, which is an amazing collection of data and just a great groundbreaking project that I encourage everyone to take a look at. It has it's had a huge impact on the way I've thought about life in the states and their role in protecting religious liberty as well. And Jordan, you were saying something?
Yeah, real quick. In addition to going to the website, Josh, a great place to learn more about the CRCD is going to be at the Ciceronian Society meeting.
Yeah,
we're going to have the event in Plano. There are going to be a couple of the Shaftesbury Fellows who present papers, including the awarding of the inaugural Piccadilly Prize, which goes to the most outstanding research project from among that group of scholars over the summer. So please do plan to visit us at the Ciceronian Society meeting as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's coming up real fast. As of today, February 2nd, we have about 10 spots left for people to come. We do have to cap it. But if you're, I don't know when this is coming out just yet. Hopefully it comes out. It's supposed to come out before the conference. So if you still have time, take a look and register. Well, Jordan and Trey, thank you so much for joining us. If you all loved this conversation and want to have more of it, please come to the conference February 29th through March 2nd at 2024 at the Hope Center in Plano, Texas. And be sure to rate and review this podcast, The Sower, and share it with your friends. Check out our website at ciceroniansociety.org. And now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all forevermore. Thank you for listening.